Cops arrest black woman for no reason. Then she shows her FBI badge. The storm clouds that loomed over Chicago that afternoon were nothing compared to the tempest about to tear through the city's police force. In a single moment, a routine traffic stop gone wrong, lives would twist, loyalties would fracture, and corruption would be dragged, screaming, into the light. A young black woman, calm and self-assured, found herself handcuffed on the sidewalk without reason. What the arresting officers didn't know was that behind her quiet gaze lay a secret that could bring the entire precinct to its knees. She was an FBI agent. The ripples of that revelation would soon become a tidal wave of reckoning. Nicole Harris was born on the south side of Chicago, where sirens often filled the night air like a broken lullaby. Her parents, Ray and Donna Harris, worked hard to keep food on the table. Ray was an electrician at a local factory. Donna was a schoolteacher who instilled an unshakable sense of ambition in her children. They lived in a modest two-bedroom apartment just a few blocks from Washington Park. The area, while vibrant in cultural heritage, battled poverty, gang violence, and strained relationships with the police. For Nicole, growing up in that environment was both a challenge and an inspiration. When she was only 8, she witnessed a brutal altercation outside her bedroom window. A teenage boy, no older than 17, was slammed against the hood of a squad car by officers twice his size. She never discovered what triggered that force, but the haunting image etched itself permanently into her memory. Nicole watched as the boy screamed for his mother while bystanders shouted at the police to stop. Instead of feeling helpless, Nicole felt something else that day, an ember of defiance against injustice. She had always been a clever child, curious about how things worked, especially human systems. After that night, she vowed to be part of the system that would protect people like that boy, people who had nowhere else to turn, who felt powerless. Throughout school, Nicole excelled academically. She had laser-focused goals: criminal justice, law enforcement, forensics, anything that would enable her to understand crime and law from the inside. Her mother supported her every step of the way, seeing Nicole's fierce passion for justice as a reflection of their family's resilience. But her father worried about the dangers. Policing is a tough job, he would say. Being a young black woman in that world is even tougher. Nicole, however, was unrelenting. She applied for every relevant internship she could find. She studied late into the night. By the time high school ended, she was valedictorian. She went on to major in criminology at the University of Illinois at Chicago UIC. There, she became fascinated by the role federal agencies played in investigating civil rights violations and organized crime. The Federal Bureau of Investigation, headquartered at the J. Edgar Hoover Building in Washington, D.C., captured her imagination. She read everything she could find about famous FBI cases, from counterterrorism operations to civil rights probes. Eventually, her impeccable grades and glowing recommendations led her to an internship with the FBI's Chicago field office. The environment was rigorous, disciplined, and sometimes daunting, but she thrived. Nicole took to the FBI's internal culture like a fish to water. She learned negotiation tactics, investigative techniques, and the agency's guiding principles: fidelity, bravery, integrity. Those words weren't just a motto. For her, they became a personal doctrine. After graduation, she underwent the FBI's notoriously challenging application process interviews, polygraph tests, background checks, physical fitness standards. Many doubted whether she could succeed so young, so quickly, but Nicole's unwavering determination and flawless record spoke louder than any naysayer's assumptions. On the day she received her acceptance letter into Quantico, she cried tears of gratitude. It felt like crossing an invisible threshold, from that 8-year-old girl staring out the window at a horrifying scene to the woman standing on the brink of a career that could help right those wrongs. She headed to Virginia for training, immersing herself in firearms proficiency, defensive tactics, legal issues, intelligence analysis. The instructors pushed her to her limits, physically and mentally. While some recruits faltered, Nicole's clarity of purpose kept her afloat. When she finally graduated from the FBI Academy, it was the proudest moment of her life. Her mother traveled to Quantico to see her daughter receive the badge. Nicole's father, a quieter man, put his arm around her and whispered, "You've made us proud, baby girl. Always remember why you started this journey." Now a special agent, Nicole found herself assigned back home to the Chicago field office on West Roosevelt Road. She considered the appointment both a blessing and a heavy responsibility. She knew how complicated the relationship between the Chicago Police Department (CPD) and local communities could be, but she also believed in the potential for collaboration and reform. She wanted to be a bridge, someone who understood the struggles of the neighborhoods and the demands of law enforcement. No matter how intense the workload became, Nicole's sense of mission remained unwavering. She was determined to bring justice where it was needed most, focusing on community outreach and federal investigations into violent crimes that plagued neighborhoods just like the one she grew up in. She was no stranger to the reality of being a black woman in a predominantly white, male field. She faced her share of skeptical glances and microaggressions, but she wore her badge with pride. In every room she stepped into, she carried her upbringing, her experiences, and her relentless commitment to fairness. In this city of grit and hope, Nicole believed that change was possible. She never guessed that her commitment would soon be tested in the most personal way possible on a sun-scorched street where a pair of overzealous cops would attempt to arrest her without cause. Chicago was a city of contrasts. Gleaming skyscrapers lit up the downtown skyline, but less than a few miles away, entire neighborhoods struggled with neglected infrastructure, crime, and underfunded schools. It was into this delicate ecosystem that Nicole re-entered, her FBI credentials in hand, determined to make a difference. The Chicago field office, located on a bustling thoroughfare, was a far cry from the stately corridors of the J. Edgar Hoover building. It felt more like home, fast-paced, diverse, a place where the urgency of the city's problems collided with an equally strong desire to solve them. Tensions with the Chicago Police Department ebbed and flowed. On the surface, the CPD and FBI worked together on joint task forces, combating gang violence, narcotics distribution, and terrorism threats. Yet behind closed doors, there was friction. Some local officers distrusted federal interference, while some feds criticized the CPD's track record of alleged brutality and misconduct. Recent high-profile incidents of police violence had set the city on edge. Protest marches became almost routine, sparking heated debates in city council meetings and on social media. Nicole felt the tension whenever she passed a CPD cruiser. At times, the officers waved politely, but more often she could sense the unspoken question in their eyes. Which side are you on? To Nicole, there was only one side: justice. But she also knew the world wasn't that simple. She often visited the neighborhoods where she grew up, encouraging residents to share concerns about law enforcement. Some folks saw her FBI jacket and refused to speak, believing federal agents were just an extension of an oppressive system. Others opened up, relieved to see a familiar face in a position of power. She gathered stories of corruption, but she also learned of good cops working tirelessly to protect their communities. Everywhere she turned, there were contradictions, complexities, and struggles, and a city weighed down by a history it couldn't easily shake off. Her supervisors at the FBI recognized her unique perspective. She was frequently assigned to community outreach, bridging gaps between federal agents and local leaders. Nicole believed she was making progress. People were calling in tips more frequently. Trust in the agency was growing. Yet she understood that real change would take time. In the midst of such precarious relations, Nicole never expected to be personally targeted by rogue officers. She carried her credentials everywhere, as required. She knew her rights and the law. She believed in the system's ability to self-correct, but the city's tension was a tinderbox, just waiting for a spark. That spark would come on a sweltering August afternoon, when an innocuous trip to pick up a housewarming gift for a friend would set in motion a chain of events that rocked the city and challenged Nicole's faith in the very institution she served. It was a Saturday, and Nicole finally had a day off. She wanted to do something thoughtful for her close friend Sarah, who had just moved into a new apartment. Sarah had raved about a small boutique in the River North neighborhood that sold handcrafted ceramics. Determined to find the perfect gift, Nicole hopped into her silver sedan and headed across town. The sun beat down mercilessly, reflecting off the asphalt and the gleaming skyscrapers. The forecast promised temperatures soaring into the high 90s, with humidity so thick it felt like walking through soup. Nicole welcomed the air conditioning inside her car. She turned up the radio, letting a soulful R&B track fill the space. Traffic was heavier than usual. Tourists crowded the sidewalks to explore Chicago's famed architecture and restaurants. As Nicole inched forward in congested lanes, she tried to relax, reminding herself this was her day to unwind, to focus on something besides investigations and paperwork. She briefly glanced at her phone, resting in the center console. No urgent messages. Just the way she wanted it. Finally, Nicole exited the highway near River North. The streets were narrower here, lined with upscale galleries, trendy cafes, and artistic murals that gave the neighborhood its charm. She noticed a couple of squad cars parked along the curb, lights off, as officers chatted with each other. It seemed ordinary enough. River North was a hot spot, and the CPD often maintained a visible presence to deter crime. Finding a space near the boutique proved challenging, so Nicole circled the block. On her second pass, she spotted a parallel parking spot half a block from her destination. She maneuvered carefully, turned off the engine, and stepped out into the punishing heat. She had just locked her car when a shout made her turn around. Two officers, both white men in their 30s, were approaching. One was tall, muscular, with a crew cut. The other was shorter, stocky, with a mustache that seemed to bristle with irritation. "Hey, you, stop right there," the taller officer barked. Nicole froze, perplexed. She hadn't done anything. At least, nothing she could think of. She glanced around, wondering if he was addressing someone else, but there was no one else nearby. "Yes, officer?" she asked, keeping her tone calm. The second officer, with the mustache, pointed at her car. "We need to see your ID and registration, now." Nicole frowned. "Is there a problem?" He stepped closer, eyes narrowing. "You're illegally parked." Nicole looked back at her car. The sign clearly indicated 2-hour parking was allowed, and she was well within the lines. She pointed this out. "Actually, I'm parked legally." The tall officer scoffed. "Don't get smart with us. Turn around, hands on the hood." Her heart began to race. This was definitely not standard procedure for a simple parking dispute. She contemplated showing them her FBI badge right then, but caution took hold. She wasn't wearing her service weapon, given it was her day off, but she did have her credentials in her wallet. She decided to comply for the moment. "Look, there's no need for this," she said gently. "I'm an FBI agent. If you'd allow me to, FBI," the stocky officer mocked with a laugh. "Sure you are." Before she could finish speaking, the tall officer grabbed her arm and spun her around, pushing her against the side of her car. The roughness of his grip shocked her, her cheek pressed against the heated metal of the hood, the scorching temperature stinging her skin. "Are you resisting?" the tall officer growled. "I'm not resisting," Nicole said, her voice tight with anxiety and a growing sense of outrage. She tried to remain calm, mindful of how quickly these situations could escalate. Bystanders began to stop, eyeing the unfolding scene. A couple of people took out their phones, starting to record. Nicole could see them in her peripheral vision. She felt humiliation creep into her chest, but also a surge of determination. This was exactly the kind of abuse of power she had joined the bureau to fight. The stocky officer rummaged through her purse, which she had dropped on the sidewalk when they grabbed her. "We'll see about these so-called FBI credentials," he sneered. "Probably fake ID." Nicole's mind raced. Even though she knew she had done nothing wrong, the intense fear of being a black woman pinned by two aggressive cops in a city already fraught with tension was overwhelming. She'd never felt so powerless, even though she was armed with the knowledge and authority of a federal agent. As the officers continued their search, Nicole tried to breathe evenly. She looked at the small crowd gathering, many filming. In some ways, the cameras felt like her only protection at this moment. She locked eyes with a young black man holding his phone. He gave her a look of empathy and concern. After what felt like an eternity, the tall officer slapped handcuffs around her wrists. The click of the metal was deafening to Nicole's ears. "You're under arrest for obstruction of justice," he declared. An incredulous anger surged in Nicole's chest. "Obstruction of justice? I haven't done anything but park my car." He ignored her, patting her down as sweat dripped down both their faces. She caught her reflection in the car's window, eyes wide with rage and humiliation. She had never envisioned this scenario, a black female FBI agent publicly treated like a criminal without the slightest provocation. At last, the stocky officer found something in her purse. Nicole couldn't see his reaction, but she knew it had to be her badge case. Her heart pounded. This was the moment that could turn the tide or make everything worse. Nicole felt heat radiate from the hood and from her own body. She tried to maintain composure, but her wrist was throbbing from the cuffs. The tall officer maintained his grip on her arm, refusing to loosen the metal biting into her skin. "Hey, Brad," the stocky officer called to his partner. He held up the black leather wallet that contained Nicole's FBI badge and ID. "Take a look at this." Officer Brad Wilson, as the name tag revealed, loosened his hold just enough to peer at the item. A skeptical frown crossed his face. "What is it?" Nicole couldn't see it herself, but she knew exactly what they were looking at. An official FBI badge with her photograph and identification. She carried it dutifully since the day she graduated from Quantico. The shorter officer, whose nameplate read Officer Tucker, turned the wallet in his hand. "It's some kind of badge, FBI seal and all." A momentary silence hung in the humid air, as if the entire street held its breath. Some bystanders murmured. Nicole heard someone whisper, "Oh my God, she really is FBI." Despite the evidence in front of them, Officer Wilson sneered. "This looks pretty authentic," he admitted, "but we get high-quality fakes all the time." Nicole had had enough. She stared at him over her shoulder. "Call the Chicago field office. Ask for Special Agent Nicole Harris. Or better yet, run my badge number through NCIC." Her voice was surprisingly steady, even though her heart hammered in her chest. She was furious at the injustice, the disrespect, the likelihood that if she weren't an FBI agent, she might be on her way to the station, or worse. Officer Tucker shoved the badge into his pocket. "We'll sort this out at the station," he said. "You're still under arrest for obstruction. Are you serious?" Nicole asked, her voice rising. "You have my credentials right there." He shot her a hostile glare. "We'll see if they're real." By now, multiple phones were recording. Pedestrians stood on the sidewalk, Some outraged, others confused. One woman yelled, "She's FBI, you idiots!" Another man hollered, "That's messed up. Let her go." Officer Wilson gestured to the crowd, irritation twisting his features. "Back off, or you'll be next." Nicole felt despair, anger, and a tinge of fear swirl inside her. She knew all the protocols, but the scenario was spiraling out of control. She couldn't believe these officers' stubborn refusal to acknowledge the truth. Just then, another squad car pulled up, lights flashing. 2 more officers jumped out, looking alarmed at the scene. "What's going on here?" one of them asked, eyeing Nicole in cuffs and the growing throng of onlookers. Officer Tucker waved the badge wallet. "Says she's FBI, but we're verifying." The newcomer glanced at the badge in Tucker's hand, then at Nicole. "Let me see that ID." Nicole braced herself, hoping rationality might finally prevail. Officer Montoya, the newcomer, took the leather wallet from Tucker. She flipped it open, inspected Nicole's photograph, her name, the official FBI seal, and the credentials. Nicole saw Montoya's expression shift from skepticism to something approaching alarm. She looked at Nicole, then back at the badge. "You might want to reconsider those handcuffs," Montoya said carefully to Wilson and Tucker. "This looks legit." Wilson, still gripping Nicole's elbow, snorted. "We can't be sure yet." Montoya lifted her radio. "Dispatch, this is Officer Montoya, requesting a verification of an FBI credential, badge number." She squinted at the ID and read out the series of numbers. Then she provided Nicole's name. Through the radio's crackle, dispatch confirmed, "Stand by." A tense silence fell over the street. Nicole sensed the crowd's anticipation, the frustration in her own racing pulse, and the officer's mounting discomfort. Finally, the radio popped again. "Officer Montoya, those credentials are confirmed. That's Special Agent Nicole Harris, assigned to the Chicago field office." Montoya nodded and looked at Wilson and Tucker. "Uncuff her. Now." Officer Wilson's face reddened. His jaw tightened as he removed the cuffs from Nicole's wrists. Tucker glanced around at the crowd, some of whom were now chanting, "Let her go! Let her go!" Nicole turned around, rubbing her sore wrists. She felt a surge of relief, but also indignation. She fixed her gaze on the 2 officers who had arrested her. "I'd like your badge numbers," she said, her voice steely. Neither Wilson nor Tucker responded. They just stared at her, as if trying to decide whether to argue or back down. Montoya handed Nicole her badge wallet with a respectful nod. "Here, Agent Harris. I'm sorry for the misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" Nicole repeated. She could barely keep her anger in check. "I was arrested, handcuffed, and humiliated in public for a legal parking job, and because you 2 refused to believe that a black woman could actually be an FBI agent." Bystanders cheered in agreement. Phones still recorded. The tension in the air was now electric. One of the local business owners stepped out to see what the commotion was about, only to gasp at the sight of Nicole in front of the squad car, her wrists red from cuff marks. Officer Montoya's partner, Officer Delgado, stepped forward. "Let's all calm down. No one wants this to get out of hand." Nicole stared him down. "It already is out of hand. I will be filing a complaint. You can count on that." Wilson finally found his voice, though it was dripping with condescension. "We had probable cause," he mumbled. "We thought, what probable cause?" Nicole snapped. "What crime did I commit?" His mouth opened, but no words came out. Tucker shoved his hands in his pockets, looking anywhere but at Nicole. Montoya exhaled slowly, glancing between them. "Look, Agent Harris, if you want to file an official complaint, you're within your rights. But let's keep this civil." Nicole's glare never wavered. "Get out of my way," she said curtly. Then she added, "I expect to hear from your Internal Affairs Division soon." She retrieved her purse from the ground, grabbed her car keys, and walked off, ignoring the pointed stares and swirling cameras. This wasn't just a personal indignity. It was a glimpse into a much deeper rot, something she now felt compelled to expose. Nicole managed to buy Sarah's housewarming gift, but her mind was elsewhere. Her hands trembled as she drove home, running on adrenaline and fury. She replayed the incident in her head, how brazenly the officers dismissed her, how quickly they escalated to force. By the time she got home, she was still shaking. She set the ceramic vase on her kitchen counter, swallowed some water, and tried to gather herself. She contemplated her options. Filing a complaint against police officers wouldn't be complicated, especially with multiple witnesses and recorded evidence. But she knew how these processes often went: lengthy investigations, vague outcomes, minimal accountability. Her phone vibrated. A text from a colleague at the Chicago field office. "Have you seen this video on Twitter? Looks like you." Heart pounding, Nicole opened the Twitter link. Someone had posted a video of the entire confrontation. She watched as it captured her lawful parking, the officer's approach, the rough handcuffing, and the moment Officer Montoya verified her credentials. The hashtag FBI while black was trending locally. Comments poured in by the second. "This is insane. When will it stop? This is why we protest. Don't they realize who they just messed with? They never believe us, no matter what we do." The footage had already garnered thousands of views and retweets. Nicole let out a slow, trembling breath. She was no stranger to the power of viral videos in the national conversation on policing. People got outraged for a few days, sometimes took to the streets in protest, but rarely did meaningful reforms come swiftly. As she scrolled through the comments, she saw a direct message request from a local journalist, Megan Albright, who worked at the Chicago Tribune. The message read, "Agent Harris, I'd love to speak with you about your experience. I believe the public needs to hear your story." Nicole stared at the message. She had to be careful. FBI policy restricted unauthorized media engagement. Normally, all press interactions needed to go through the Bureau's Public Affairs Office. If she gave a statement to the press, especially one that cast the CPD in a harsh light, there could be repercussions for her career. On the other hand, the video was already out there, and the public was demanding answers. She sank onto a living room couch, still wearing the same outfit in which she'd been handcuffed hours earlier. Her phone lit up again this time, her supervisor's number. Nicole steeled herself, knowing what conversation was coming. "Nicole, it's Jeff," said the firm yet concerned voice on the other end. "I just saw the video. Are you okay?" "Yeah," she sighed, leaning her head back, eyes closed. "I'm fine, angry, but fine." Jeff cleared his throat. "We need you to come in Monday morning to discuss this. The special agent in charge wants a full report and will coordinate an official statement if necessary. For now, do not speak to the press, okay?" Nicole recognized the subtext. The Bureau was walking a tightrope. The last thing they wanted was a high-profile feud with the CPD, but ignoring a blatant civil rights violation against one of their own was unthinkable. She ended the call, feeling both grateful and uneasy. This was bigger than just her. She could sense it. The swirling storm on social media, combined with the tension already present in Chicago over policing, meant the next few days could escalate fast. Somewhere deep in her gut, Nicole knew she couldn't let this slide. This wasn't merely an insult. It was a symptom of a system that often devalued and criminalized black bodies, even when they wore a federal badge. Monday morning arrived under slate-gray skies that threatened rain. Nicole walked into the Chicago field office, feeling a knot in her stomach. She had spent the weekend drafting a meticulous account of the incident. The tension of waiting for official action, combined with the relentless onslaught of social media chatter, had made for a sleepless couple of nights. Her supervisor, Jeff Wallace, was waiting in the conference room, alongside the Assistant Special Agent in charge ASAC, Linda Baker, and two representatives from the Bureau's Office of Professional Responsibility, OPR. They greeted Nicole gravely, offering her a seat. "Agent Harris," Baker began, her voice measured and formal, "we've reviewed the video footage and your written report. The Bureau considers this a serious matter." Nicole nodded. "Thank you, I appreciate the support. But I'm worried the CPD will either try to dismiss what happened or double down on their narrative." Jeff leaned forward, hands clasped. "Nicole, you need to know that the CPD is already conducting its own internal investigation. Their top brass reached out to us, expressing concern and apologizing for the officers' actions. That said, I also want you to be prepared for any pushback. Sometimes these investigations get messy." Nicole felt a surge of relief that the CPD had at least acknowledged wrongdoing, but she remained skeptical. She'd seen too many cases of apologies that later morphed into spin campaigns. An OPR representative, a stiff-looking man with a thin mustache, spoke next. "We would like to request an official statement from you, Agent Harris, and we will coordinate with our public affairs team before any media interactions. The last thing we need is a public relations fiasco. We want the truth out there, but we also need to maintain collaborative relationships with the local police." Her lips tightened. "I understand. But I also want to make sure there's accountability. This isn't just about me, it's about a pattern of behavior that affects so many." Baker gave her a sympathetic look. "Believe me, we're aware. The director in DC was briefed on the situation. He wants this handled promptly and fairly." Nicole glanced at Jeff. "What do you need from me now?" He sighed. "We'll be setting up a meeting with CPD leadership, along with their internal affairs. We need your testimony, your badge camera records, if available though you weren't on duty, so I assume that's not applicable, and any additional evidence. There are at least 6 different cell phone videos circulating, so that also will come into play." Nicole nodded again, steeling herself. "I'm ready." As she left the conference room, she could feel the weight of the Bureau's eyes upon her. This case wasn't just her personal quest for justice. It had become a public test of how federal and local law enforcement dealt with allegations of racial profiling and misconduct, especially when the victim was one of their own. Outside, the sky finally let loose a torrent of rain, pattering against the glass windows of the field office. Nicole watched the downpour and wondered if it was some kind of omen. Change often came like a storm, turbulent, chaotic, but ultimately cleansing. She could only hope the city was ready for it. That afternoon, Nicole arrived at the Chicago Police Department's headquarters on South Michigan Avenue. A formal meeting had been scheduled between her, representatives from the FBI CPD's Internal Affairs Division, and the CPD's top brass. She felt a mixture of trepidation and defiance as she walked through the grand lobby with its polished floors and the emblem of the CPD prominently displayed. The conference room was large, with a long wooden table and a dozen chairs on each side. On one wall hung portraits of past police commissioners, a silent reminder of the department's storied and often controversial history. Nicole found a seat alongside Jeff and OPR counsel. Across from them sat CPD Chief Anthony Ramirez, flanked by several senior officers, including the head of Internal Affairs, Captain Andrea Carter. Chief Ramirez was a tall, imposing figure with salt and pepper hair. He folded his arms, looking decidedly uneasy. "Agent Harris, on behalf of the department, I want to extend my apologies for the experience you endured. The officers involved, Wilson and Tucker, have been placed on desk duty pending the outcome of our investigation." Nicole studied the faces around the table. Some appeared genuinely remorseful. Others wore expressions of guarded defensiveness. "Thank you for the apology, Chief Ramirez," she said calmly. "But words alone won't solve the deeper issue at hand." Captain Carter cleared her throat. "We understand. That's why we've launched an internal review. We'll be looking at body cam footage, eyewitness statements, and any other relevant material. The fact you're an FBI agent doesn't exempt our officers from accountability, but we want to ensure a fair, impartial process." Jeff chimed in. "We also expect full cooperation from your side. This incident has drawn significant public attention. The Bureau is prepared to stand behind Agent Harris in seeking justice." Nicole noticed subtle shifts in posture among the CPD brass, stiffening shoulders, pursed lips. It was clear some of them resented federal involvement in what they saw as a local matter. Chief Ramirez spoke again. "While we respect the FBI's position, we must handle this through our established protocols. If you have any evidence to bring forward, please do so through the official channels. Our aim is the truth." Nicole leaned forward, her voice resolute. "The truth is that your officers racially profiled me, used excessive force, and humiliated me in public. If it weren't for the video footage, who knows how they might have spun the story." Silence gripped the room. Captain Carter finally nodded. "Understood. We take allegations of racial profiling seriously, Agent Harris. You have my assurance that the investigation will be thorough." As the meeting drew to a close, Nicole handed over a copy of her written statement. Outside the room, Jeff gave her a supportive pat on the shoulder. "You did great," he murmured. Nicole exhaled, feeling both defiant and oddly drained. A sense of unreality clung to her. This was her life now, caught between two powerful institutions, demanding accountability for a wrong that should never have happened. She left headquarters with the awareness that a battle line had been drawn. Whether the CPD would stand by their pledge of a fair process remained to be seen. Within days, local news outlets latched onto the story of the FBI agent wrongly arrested by CPD. Segments ran on evening broadcasts, featuring snippets of the viral videos and interviews with eyewitnesses. Megan Albright from the Chicago Tribune wrote an in-depth article referencing the city's tumultuous history with law enforcement misconduct. Calls began flooding the CPD's public affairs hotline. Community leaders demanded an explanation and swift disciplinary action. Civil rights groups, including the local chapter of the ACLU, issued statements condemning racial profiling. Politicians weighed in, some using the incident to bolster calls for reform, others cautioning the public not to rush to judgment. Nicole found herself in the eye of the media storm. She fielded call after call, some from well-meaning reporters looking for her perspective, others from people who just wanted a sensational scoop. Per the FBI's guidance, she refrained from going on camera or granting interviews, but she couldn't avoid the swirl of public attention. Everywhere she went, people recognized her. One morning, her mother called, her voice laced with worry. "Baby, I saw you on TV last night, some news report about what those police did. Are you all right?" Nicole sighed into the phone. "I'm okay, Mom. Just dealing with a lot of stress. It'll blow over eventually." But Donna Harris wasn't so sure. "I know you're strong, Nicole, but be careful. People can get ugly about these things." She felt a surge of gratitude for her mother's concern, but also a stab of guilt for putting her parents through this emotional turmoil. She assured her mother she'd be cautious, even as she recognized the fight for justice was far from over. Meanwhile, a groundswell of public opinion was forming in Nicole's favor. Protesters marched outside the CPD headquarters, demanding accountability not just for the two officers who arrested her, but for the entire department's culture. Signs read, "If they do this to an FBI agent, imagine the rest of us, and racial profiling is a crime." Amid the uproar, the CPD scrambled to manage its image. Press conferences were held, where a visibly tense Chief Ramirez reiterated that the department was conducting a thorough investigation. Captain Carter assured reporters that they would leave no stone unturned. Yet the public wanted immediate consequences, and justice felt agonizingly slow. Nicole's FBI colleagues offered a mix of support and caution. Some rallied around her, encouraging her to stand strong. Others seemed worried that her involvement in such a high-profile dispute could jeopardize interagency cooperation. Jeff, her supervisor, took every opportunity to remind her not to speak out of turn. In her quieter moments, Nicole wrestled with conflicting emotions. She was furious at the officers who had treated her like a criminal. She was disillusioned with a system that had so quickly turned on one of its own. Yet she also believed in justice, in due process, and in the possibility of real change. On a Wednesday evening, she found herself scrolling through countless social media posts, some supportive, some vitriolic. One message caught her eye, a private note from a CPD officer she didn't know. It read, "Agent Harris, I'm deeply sorry about what happened to you. Some of us in the department are disgusted by Wilson and Tucker's actions. I hope you won't lose faith in all of us." Nicole felt tears prick her eyes. She replied with a thank you, recognizing that not everyone within the CPD was her enemy. The problem was bigger than just two rogue cops. It was an ingrained culture that allowed this kind of abuse to happen so routinely. As the days turned into weeks, the media frenzy showed no signs of abating. Even national outlets began picking up the story, linking it to broader debates about policing in America. Nicole realized she had become something of a symbol, a black woman standing at the intersection of federal law enforcement and the fight against systemic racism. It was a responsibility she never asked for, but she refused to shy away from it. Instead, she used the momentum to push for broader conversations, quietly urging the FBI's leadership to back meaningful reforms. If the spotlight was on her, she reasoned she might as well use that light to expose deeper truths. Behind the scenes, Officer Wilson and Officer Tucker found themselves under increasing scrutiny. Both had histories of complaints for excessive force, though none had resulted in official disciplinary action before. Internal Affairs interviewed them repeatedly, comparing their statements to the video evidence. The CPD rank and file was divided. Some officers closed ranks around Wilson and Tucker, claiming they were being unfairly demonized. Others quietly acknowledged that the duo was known for their aggressive tactics, particularly in communities of color. The question now was whether the department would finally hold them accountable or find a way to excuse their actions once again. Meanwhile, Nicole's OPR liaison informed her that a new piece of evidence had surfaced: internal messages from Wilson and Tucker's patrol car computer. A whistleblower within the CPD had leaked logs showing derogatory language used by Tucker earlier that day. Phrases like "gotta watch these people" and "she's probably on welfare" had been typed shortly before they approached Nicole. When Nicole read the logs, her stomach turned. The blatant racism was undeniable. This wasn't a simple misunderstanding, it was a willful act of prejudice. She shared the evidence with Jeff, who immediately forwarded it to the legal department. The following day, in an explosive turn of events, those logs were published in the Chicago Tribune. The uproar was immediate and intense, sparking another wave of protests and condemnation. Civil rights advocates seized on the logs as proof that the arrest was rooted in racism, not mere procedural error. At the same time, Nicole received an email from the FBI's Civil Rights Division in Washington. They wanted to open a federal investigation into the arrest, citing possible civil rights violations. For Nicole, this was a bittersweet development. Part of her was relieved that high-level attention might force real accountability. Another part of her dreaded the increased pressure and the potential for retaliation. Behind closed doors, CPD leaders convened crisis meetings. They issued statements condemning the language used by the officers, stating it didn't represent the department's values. But the public was losing patience. Calls for Chief Ramirez's resignation began circulating, though it wasn't clear if he bore direct responsibility for the officers' conduct. Nicole found herself at the center of it all, her phone buzzing constantly with interview requests, messages of support, and the occasional hateful rant. She was exhausted, but she felt a moral imperative to see this through. Privately, she worried about her parents' safety, about her own. She wasn't naive. She knew how some officers might react if they perceived her as an enemy of the department, but she refused to be intimidated. If the system was ever going to change, it needed voices from the inside willing to speak up. And so, with every new revelation, every leaked log, and every public demonstration, cracks appeared in the armor that had shielded bad cops for too long. The question now was whether those cracks would widen into a permanent fissure, one capable of dismantling the very foundations of corruption and bias. The tension reached a boiling point when CPD Internal Affairs formally recommended that Officers Wilson and Tucker be suspended without pay, pending termination. The language of their report was damning, a clear violation of departmental policy, including racial bias and excessive use of force. News of the recommendation rattled the police force. Some officers rallied to defend Wilson and Tucker, while others sighed in relief, grateful that the department was finally addressing these chronic problems. Nicole heard the news from Jeff, who walked into her office holding a copy of the report. "It's a big step," he said, handing it over. "They're going to terminate them if the police board approves." She felt a wave of mixed emotions. It's something, but it doesn't erase what happened, or what happens to countless others who don't have an FBI badge to protect them. Jeff nodded solemnly. "I know, but it sets a precedent that the department can't sweep these incidents under the rug anymore, especially when they become public." Meanwhile, the federal investigation gained traction. Investigators from the Civil Rights Division interviewed Nicole, the bystanders who had recorded the incident, and other CPD officers who'd worked with Wilson and Tucker. A pattern of discriminatory behavior began to emerge. Lawsuits filed by other victims surfaced, detailing similar arrests and harassment. Then came the day of the hearing at the police board, an independent body that determined final discipline for officers. Members of the public packed the room, many wearing shirts that read "Justice for Nicole." The tension was palpable. Wilson and Tucker appeared with their attorneys, who tried to spin the narrative that their clients made a reasonable mistake and acted in good faith. They argued that Nicole's defiance had escalated the situation. The board members, however, repeatedly referenced the leaked patrol car logs and the glaring mismatch between the officers' statements and the video evidence. Nicole took the stand, recounting the incident step by step. The attorneys attempted to discredit her, hinting that she had blown the situation out of proportion. But each time they pressed, Nicole calmly reiterated the facts, which were already plain to see on the recordings. After deliberations that lasted 3 hours, the board rendered its decision. Both officers would be terminated from the CPD, effective immediately. An audible sigh of relief rippled through the room. Some in the crowd cheered, others wept with joy. Outside, reporters thrust microphones toward Nicole, begging for a statement. She glanced at Jeff, who nodded in approval. Gathering her courage, she faced the cameras and said, "This is an important moment, not just for me, but for everyone who's ever been targeted unfairly. Accountability is the first step toward rebuilding trust. I hope this can be a catalyst for deeper reforms." Her words echoed across the city, carried by the evening news and social media shares. For once, it felt like the system had delivered a measure of justice. Yet Nicole knew this was not an end, but but rather a beginning of a much longer fight for true equality. The fallout for Wilson and Tucker didn't end with their termination. The federal investigation continued to examine whether their actions constituted civil rights violations, warranting criminal charges. As more stories surfaced about similar misconduct by the pair, the possibility of indictments grew stronger. For the CPD as a whole, the incident triggered a wave of introspection and reform proposals. City council members pushed for greater oversight. Activists lobbied for the creation of a community review board with the power to investigate allegations of police misconduct. The mayor, under increasing political pressure, announced an initiative to diversify the police force and ramp up anti-bias training. Chief Ramirez, who had initially tried to contain the incident quietly, found his leadership questioned. Some critics argued he should have acted more swiftly and publicly in condemning the officer's actions. While he managed to keep his position, the ordeal tarnished his reputation, and rumors swirled that he might retire early. In the midst of this upheaval, Nicole received an invitation from the FBI's national headquarters. They wanted her to participate in a panel on law enforcement ethics and racial bias. It was an unexpected opportunity to share her perspective with some of the Bureau's highest-ranking officials. She flew to Washington, D.C., feeling both honored and overwhelmed. The panel took place in a stately conference hall at the J. Edgar Hoover Building. Seated alongside other prominent figures, civil rights attorneys, experienced FBI agents, and even a few police chiefs, Nicole spoke candidly about her experience. "This isn't just about me being an FBI agent," she said, her voice resonating across the room. "It's about the wider reality that people of color face every day, fear of being unjustly targeted, mistreated, or worse by law enforcement. We must do better. That requires not just punishing bad actors, but transforming the entire culture that enables them." Her words drew applause, and several agents approached her afterward, sharing their own stories and offering support. Some expressed frustration with their local police partnerships, acknowledging the tension between federal ideals and on-the-ground realities. Nicole felt a glimmer of hope, sensing that momentum for real change was building, at least in some pockets of federal law enforcement. Back in Chicago, Nicole resumed her duties at the field office. There was a newfound respect from colleagues who saw her not just as an agent, but as a symbol of courage and integrity. Still, the scars from her ordeal ran deep. She found herself double-checking her rear-view mirror whenever she passed a CPD cruiser, a habit she hated but couldn't quite break. One afternoon, she received an unexpected visitor, Officer Montoya, the one who had listened to the badge verification on the scene. Montoya walked into the lobby of the field office, looking nervous, holding her cap in her hands. "Agent Harris," Montoya said, voice trembling slightly, "I just wanted to say I'm sorry. Sorry for not standing up sooner, for not doing more in the moment. I hope you can forgive me." Nicole studied the officer's remorseful expression and extended a hand. "Montoya, I appreciate that. I don't hold grudges against people trying to do the right thing. We all need to be braver when we see wrongdoing." The two shook hands, an unspoken acknowledgement passing between them. Real change demands personal courage, even when it means challenging colleagues or superiors. And so, while the city still faced daunting challenges, deep-rooted corruption, racial divides, and civic unrest, there were signs of progress. Honest conversations were happening in precincts, in community meetings, and in the corridors of power. A sense of possibility took root, fragile but real. Nicole found herself inspired by that possibility. Even after facing humiliation and doubt, she was determined to remain in Chicago, to continue her work with the Bureau, and to help steer law enforcement toward a more just and humane future. It wouldn't be easy, but she'd learned that real progress rarely is. For every arrogant cop like Wilson, there was a Montoya, or a Delgado, or a Carter. ready to be part of the solution if only they could muster the courage. As the dust finally began to settle, a new path opened up for Nicole, one where she could use her experience to push for meaningful change, not just in Chicago, but throughout the country. Her courage in standing up against injustice had sparked a conversation larger than any single precinct or department could contain. People began to believe that even the most rigid institutions can be reshaped when enough voices speak out for what's right. Now, we need your voice too. Keep the momentum going by sharing this story. Spread the word to friends, family, and neighbors. Let them see what happens when one person decides to fight back against a broken system. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to stay connected, and share this video with everyone you know. Because together, we can ensure that justice and accountability aren't just words, they're the foundation of our society.